Hi everyone, and welcome back to this continuing saga of my Lightroom tutorials. We're slowly working our way through the various panels, and today we've got to the transform tool. What the tool allows us to do is to correct these perspective problems, such as these converging verticals that we've got here, as our building's leaning in, usually because we've taken on a wide angle lens, and I was probably way too close to the building. But the transform tool can help us to fix that. And there are a number of methods under the panel. We've got auto, guided, level, vertical, full. What we'll do is we'll have a quick look at each of those, and then we'll look about how these manual options do a similar sort of thing. One of the things that's recommended before you alter any of these is just to make sure in lens corrections you've enabled the basic corrections, just by checking that enable profile corrections. You can do it afterwards actually. There's this weird update option here which I can never seem to get ungrayed. If you make changes and then apply lens corrections, this should come on and allow you to update it, but it never seems to work for me. That's what that is there for anyway. But yeah, just make sure you've got your profile corrections turned on first. So let's have a look at the options. We're going to transform, and the first one is auto. If I hover over it for a little while, there we go, enable balance, level, aspect ratio and perspective corrections. And what it will try and do is it will try and straighten up the perspective so that we get these upright, and it will try and level it off, make sure our horizon's level, and try and maintain the aspect ratio of it as well, so it doesn't squash it up or pull it apart. So if we just click on auto, and you see it does a pretty good job, to be fair. Got nice straight uprights now. Our ground looks pretty level. So yeah, it's done a pretty good job, and in this case you could possibly just leave it at that. We'll come back to guided in a minute because it's the one that involves the most user interaction, if you like. But for now I'm just going to turn off this auto, so we go back to our original one. And level. This picture, I actually managed to get my camera quite straight for a change, but if I was to just, for example, just rotate this picture slightly for the sake of demonstration, the level will basically try and find a horizon, or what it deems to be a horizon, and level it off based on that piece of information. So if I click on level, we get our picture straightened back up, but you'll notice it doesn't change anything in terms of the perspective of the building. We've still got these converging verticals. Because my horizon is pretty level in this instance, just for a change, we could just jump straight to the vertical, and that will just look at correcting this perspective issue. If we click on it, and you'll see it's straightened the verticals, but what you will notice is we've got this white area here where it's transformed the picture. Unlike when we did auto, Lightroom hasn't automatically cropped the picture for us to get rid of this area now, which doesn't exist in the picture effectively. Where we've changed the perspective, there was no picture there in the past, so it's just blank. We could fix this manually. If we use vertical, we can go to our crop tool, and if we just unlock it so we're not constraining our ratio, we could just pull this in and manually crop it like so, and that would fix the problem. You could try and be clever, depending on what your picture's like. If you took it into Photoshop or something like that, you may be able to do some sort of content aware fill on those areas, but it very much depends on your picture. So now we're going to jump back to guided before we look at full, because to understand full we need to see what guided actually does. And what guided allows us to do is to actually select our own verticals that we want to correct and our own horizontals that we want to treat as the horizon. So unlike when Lightroom did it using auto, it automatically chose these options. Guided will allow us to choose them ourselves. So if we just click on guided, and the way we can do that is we can actually draw lines on our picture for which verticals we want to straighten. If you don't get this little loop view incidentally, just check that this guide thing is actually blank like this, and then you'll see it. And what we can do now is we can actually draw a line on our picture. You'll see it there. We draw the first one, it doesn't do anything. It needs another reference line, so let's use another side of the building, which come down here, and we just do that, and you'll see that it's straightened the verticals now based on the lines that we've chosen. We can go one stage further. We've still got the problem with the crop incidentally, but we'll address that later. We established earlier that when we did auto it used this kind of grass line probably as our horizon, but this line here is actually slightly off as well. And if we address this one first, what I can actually do is draw a horizontal line here so that Lightroom attempts to level that up for us. And there we go. It looks a little bit weird, but and the real beauty of guided is we don't need to have just one line. So we can now also select, say, along this line of a window here, because we want those straight. And you'll see now it pulls all of the perspective back in for us. If you're not happy with what it's done, you can actually change these lines as well if you grab the edges. Let's just make it wrong, just so that you can see that. But we can literally just grab these bits and pull them in, line them up to where we want. Same for our verticals. So don't worry if you don't get it quite right first time. Maximum feature. I've tried to create a new one. You can only have 4. Let's try and grab that bit better. That's better. Make that level again, just to straighten it off. So these are editable once you've created them. So just coming back to full now. Full is kind of a combination between guided and auto. When we did auto, we said that it picked the verticals by probably picking 2 lines of its own choice, and it leveled off our picture by selecting horizon. But what full actually does is a bit like guided. It can actually use more than one line for our horizontal. So if we actually turn this off and we click on full, you'll see we get a very similar image to what we did when we used guided. The only difference is, again, Lightroom is choosing which lines on the horizontal it wants to use to level the picture up and to fix the perspective. Which one of the options you choose very much depends on what your picture looks like to start with. As we saw, we could have probably got away with just vertical because my horizon was already quite level. So you just need to have a look at your picture, maybe try a few and see what works best. The other option, of course, is you could do some of this manually. If we turn this back off again, back to our original picture, we could use our vertical slider here to fix our converging verticals. If you'll see me, so I just adjust this, you'll see how it affects the picture. So we can bring the vertical in, which just straightens up the verticals. We can also play around with our horizontal, which will allow us to get our levels a little bit, perhaps. Very difficult to play around with. You'll see the effect that that's having. For leveling off horizons and things, we've also got the rotate option, but I think it's quite difficult to use this, to be honest, to get an accurate level possible. There we go. We also talked about the fact that sometimes when you change the perspective, you get this kind of crushing or stretching of the image, and that's what the aspect slider does. We can adjust our aspect to stretch the image out. Very difficult to tell on some buildings. People are a good frame of reference. You can get a good idea whether the aspect looks correct if you've got people in the picture. But that's what the aspect does. It allows you to sort of like stretch it out a little bit, so get something that maybe looks a little bit more natural. And we can use the scale to effectively zoom in and out on our picture. So we've lost quite a lot here where we changed the aspect. We could scale it in now to effectively enlarge it, like so. So that's what the scale option does. And the offset's a bit of a weird one. It will shift the picture left or right, up and down for X and Y, obviously. So we can do this, which if you do zoom in, may be quite useful. If we was to scale it in a little bit more, for example, we might want to pull it over to our left a little bit. So you could use it in that way. So you have these manual options. I'm just going to actually come back out, reset that. The last one down here is the Constrain Crop, which will automatically get rid of this blank area for us, like so. You can leave that turned on, and it will keep adjusting for us as we go. There we go. So that's it for this tutorial on the transform panel. I hope that was of use to you. If it was, great, and if you're not already a subscriber to this series, then it'll be great to have you on board, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.